All right, guys, welcome back to Blood, Sweat, and Gear with coaches Skip Hill, Andrew Berry, and myself, Scott McNally. All of our programming is brought to you by TrueNutrition.com. Use our code THINK for additional savings. You get high-quality, third-party tested supplements over there, great protein powders, every awesome carbohydrate you can think of, including highly branded Cyclic Dextrin, which I think is going to come up today. Check out supplementsource.ca for our Canadians. I saw the Meadows Recovery product over there a while back now for like $20 a tub. They have label changes, short-dated stuff. So pick up what you can get over there. Tell them that we said hello. All Canada. That's all, everybody Canada, supplementsource.ca. You guys go check that out. And of course, thank you to everybody from Patreon. We've got a topic today. We're going to discuss intra-workout carbohydrates. And we talked about this a while ago. It was an episode that you weren't with us, Skip. If I recall, because we've talked so many times now, you're not a huge intra-workout guy from what I remember, but remind me, and then I'm going to share my ideas, and Andrew's going to share his ideas. We'll talk all what we think about using Intra.
I am with insulin.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Lay it on
Without
us.
it, I'm pretty much an intra-carb with insulin, or I am no intra-carb. And
Okay.
I have admittedly not, the vast majority of the years that I have trained have been 95% no intra.
I thought you were going to say natural.
Yeah, no. I was natural. I have a couple natural shows there in Michigan where I was legit natural, but that was back in like 32, 33 during the Depression.
Yeah.
No one was going to show up, so I knew I could win. Yeah.
So,
well, why don't we talk about why someone wouldn't want to use intra-workout nutrition first? Right?
Okay. Yeah.
Because, I mean, I can think of a few examples right off the top of my head, you know. One being someone just doesn't like having fluid volume in their stomach. Like maybe they'll do a few sips of water. Yeah, like they just don't like the feeling of, you know, ingesting anything, especially if it's sugary. Because a lot of times people get like that dry mouth when they're drinking something sugary. And it just kind of aggravates them. Or especially if you're having like a hard leg day, they start to kind of feel nauseous and they're spending more time thinking about throwing up than they are focused on their training. So I could totally see that as, you know, as a valid reason. And I listen to my clients when they say, hey, I don't feel good while I'm training. And the first thing we'll do is we'll lower the intra if I have them doing it, or we might even pull it right out. And usually we just end up pulling it right out. Like for instance, you know, Nate's my training partner. He doesn't do an intra workout because for that very reason. He doesn't like how sweet, you know, the highly branded Cyclic Dextrin and Cluster Dextrins taste, and they kind of make him feel like he needs to drink more and more, and then it leads him feeling like he's just not able to get an effective workout that way. So I don't have an intra workout in his plan.
Mm-hmm. That was part of my issue. It would make me feel full. Gastric emptying was not good, and it would depend on what those intra-carbs were. So I'll go on record and say that I hated waxy maize, and I still do. And the best way to explain it, and I won't say who it is who argued with me blue in the face, because we would argue all the time. His name rhymes with, say, Ponte. I was waiting for the smile from both of you. So I'm not going to say who it is, okay? But it does rhyme with that. You take waxy maize and you put it in a shaker cup and you let it sit for only 3 minutes. What happens? Comes out of solution.
Thickens up.
It all comes down. Now, it may not all come down, but it starts to come out of solution after only a couple minutes. I always argued that that's what it did in the gut, because the gut, though there's movement, there's not enough movement, in my opinion, to keep it from coming. And if it comes out of solution at all, then you're going to have an issue with emptying. You're going to have an issue with it being assimilated. And it just would weigh so heavy on my stomach. So that's the one thing. So I have intracarbs that I tolerate very well now, but there's a caveat. And that brings me to number 2. I need to get my last meal roughly 2 hours or slightly more than 2 hours before I start training and I start ingesting my intracarbs. Because if the meal is too close, then it's going to have a similar effect in the sense that it's going to sit in there with that food and it's just going to weigh me down. I'm not saying that it's not being used. All I'm saying is it makes me feel heavy. It makes me feel kind of distended, that sort of thing. It just doesn't sit well. I would much rather, even with insulin now, and even with the 2-hour gap, I would much rather not use it based entirely on how I feel when I train from a gut standpoint. But the reality is I benefit tremendously from the Intra with the EAAs and with the insulin. The other thing that people need to remember too, just because I guess I'm going to throw in a third, is you do need to have enough water.
Yeah.
It needs to be diluted enough so that it's not heavy and it's not thick and it doesn't feel like literally food in your stomach.
So just to give a little bit of background on Intra workouts, and I know that all three of us had used this in the past. At least I would be shocked if we didn't. Decade plus ago, more than a decade ago, we were using Dextrose Intra workout. Did you guys use Dextrose to start?
Yeah.
We'd use Dextrose and then mix in some EA or some BCAAs. Like that was the technology at the time. And you could also use maltodextrin. Yeah.
We go back one step further. I was the idiot who would combine dextrose with whey concentrate.
Okay.
Not a full scoop, but 10 grams of whey concentrate along with dextrose powder. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
So you can imagine how that feels.
Thick. That was, yeah. And probably not that delicious either. But so we went from there, and then there was also maltodextrin. And I found personally that the higher I took dextrose, the more it would affect my appetite post-workout. And I know that people have had digestion issues. Some people get diarrhea if they just start slamming a bunch of dextrose into your workout. I never had that problem, but I've heard that's happened. And then from there, we got into the whack. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to explain why, right? Because,
okay.
Like, I mean, I think this is a good point to talk about it. And this is where this whole topic came up again, because one of my clients, who's a good client, is also coaching athletes. And a question came up about, I have him doing Intra, and I always list what I want him to take. And then I think he was kind of thinking in his mind, oh, any old carb would work. And he was just doing plain Gatorade powder from Walmart, you know, which is pretty much 100% dextrose. And I explained to him the whole reason, and I should go back a step further and say, he was describing exactly what you were saying. He was ingesting the dextrose, feeling a full stomach, and it was taken away from his workout, right?
Yeah.
So the whole reason, and you got to think about the molecular weight of the carbohydrate. With dextrose, it's somewhere around 80 grams per mole, right? On the other end of the spectrum, we have, say, waxy maize, which is, let's say, 120,000 grams per mole. And then on the further end of the spectrum, we have cyclic dextrin, which is somewhere in the 200 to 400,000 grams per mole. What does that mean, right? We're talking about the molecular weight, and it affects the osmolarity of the product, meaning how quickly that product will run through your digestive system and enter the bloodstream, right?
Yeah.
And something like dextrose, there's a lot of little particles in there. Water's going to rush in from the exercising muscle, from the rest of the vasculature into the digestive system to help digestion. So you're sending a mixed signal to your brain. You're trying to exercise, which is sympathetic, right? Fight or flight. You're trying to do your max lifts, and you're sending a mixed signal at the same time saying, hey, we're also trying to digest a meal, which is a parasympathetic action, rest and digest. Yeah. So you're sending these mixed signals to your body, and your brain's saying, we don't know what to do. We should go throw up. We should crap it out. We should just kind of sit here and try until we feel better. So that's kind of the whole reason why we're moving we've moved from dextrose to these other high molecular weight carbohydrate sources.
Yeah, we moved to the waxy maize next, and then from there now we finally, I guess the best would be the highly branched cyclic dextrin, and they're better at attaching to amino acids too, right? For shuttling that. So I mean, you may have picked up a few aminos from dextrose, a few more from one of the either I would put like Vitargo and waxy maize kind of in that same boat, and then moving on to the highly branched cyclic dextrin, we're just freaking scooping that stuff into the muscle basically.
I would rate it from, say, like dextrose and maltodextrin to waxy maize amylocell to Vitargo and then carbolin and then cluster dextrin, highly branched cyclic dextrin. Absolutely. And the cool thing about the cluster dextrin is that it creates the carbohydrate structure is almost like a cone shape, and it kind of pulls electrolytes, other small aminos, sodium, potassium, all those other things. Creatine, it pulls it with it through the bloodstream into the muscle cell. So it kind of acts like a net in a sense. And it's used, some of the cyclic dextrins are actually used in different sprays. Febreze, for example, to help bring the aromatic compounds so you smell them at a farther distance. Yeah.
Oh no, Febreze it's not so that you smell it in Febreze. It locks it up so that the cones will like attach to the smells and then basically fall into the carpet. So when you spray Febreze, the smell goes away. So I'm thinking of something different.
No, it's yeah, I mean, maybe that's another mechanism, but no, it carries the aromatic compounds so that you smell them further distances. So you're like, this is clean in here. Like they've cleaned.
Yeah, with Febreze.
I'm not saying that what you said wasn't true as well, though.
Yeah, we're talking about something different then. Yeah, because I heard it was Justin Harris who would talk about this.
Mm-hmm. Slightly different properties.
Yeah, it was Justin Harris.
I see what you're saying. You guys are coming at it from a different. Andrew's talking about the smell of the actual spray. You're talking about the smell that you're trying to hide.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's I'm sitting in the middle and I'm watching you guys come from two different ends of the spectrum.
I'm saying it does both. I hadn't heard what Scott said before, but I agree that it makes a lot of sense. I agree with both the statements.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about it from the other side of things on how that would work. Anyway, though, so dosing, guys, what would you say? So if we'd probably all be in agreement that if you can afford it, highly, like a cluster dextrin, highly branched cyclic dextrin would be the best route to go. It's not going to affect your digestion as much for most people. What would we go for dosing on something like that to start?
Oh, that's easy. 8 units of insulin and 50 grams. 50 grams of carbs. Sorry, I just for some reason I think that's hilarious, but whatever.
It's so individualistic though, right? Because like someone's digestive system can handle 150 grams of carbohydrates in a workout. I've done as much as that at one time and I felt great. Obviously insulin was being used at that point. But then there's some people that need to do like 20 to 30 grams tops, And I also want to say that you don't need to be 100% with say cyclic dextrin. Like a lot of times, because cyclic dextrin is a lot more expensive than say a dextrose powder, I tell people, hey, we need to experiment a little bit. If money's an issue, maybe we go 80-20 in terms of concentration, right? So if we're doing 50 grams of carbs intra, we'll try 40 grams of cyclic and 10 grams of Gatorade powder, and we'll go from there. And you might be able to move that cheaper carbohydrate source up without any digestive issues. It just takes a little trial and error.
Yeah. So, but where would you start for somebody? Let's say you had somebody come to you and they're like, hey, you guys are going to decide, like, okay, 40 would be the start?
Yeah, without insulin. I want to see what 40 does first and how they feel on it, how their pumps are, without using, say, an insulin source, right off the bat. And then, I'll probably start bumping it up from there in 10 to 20 gram increments. As far as a limit, I mean, like I said, when I first started, I was taking 50 grams, and then eventually I was up to 100, and the next thing I knew, in a real big push, I was up to 150. So I think just small incremental changes, seeing how your body takes to it, is the way to go.
How much water did you have? Because I did the 150. I think 200 was the highest I ever went, and that was back when John was first really pushing. John pushed the boundaries with IntraWorkouts, And at the time, he was talking to Shelby a lot about that, and they just kept driving it up. So we were literally walking around with gallon jugs.
Yeah, he did a lot of talks with Milos too at this around that time period.
Yeah.
Because I remember I had to take an interview and then copy all the notes down between the conversation and turn it into a PDF for John to use for bullet point notes and talks and even his programs that he'd write for people. But I think that because then it's well, when do you throw the insulin in, right? When do you experiment with the insulin? And I think the biggest pushback we always get from people when you mention insulin is oh, I don't want to do anything dangerous. Yeah. And I think similar to the topic we had a few months ago about T3 use. Yeah. It's look, if you use it intelligently, and by intelligently I mean you understand that one tick on an insulin needle is 1 unit, and you don't overdose, you're going to be complete. You shouldn't even notice it. You shouldn't even. Right. You shouldn't feel hypo. It shouldn't be a factor that oh shoot, like I'm feeling like I'm going hypo because you've adjusted the dose correctly, you know?
Yeah.
And that's a kind of a rabbit hole too with the insulin, because we're talking about Intra. We're not really talking about insulin, but now that
you brought up the insulin, Skip,
dumbass brought it up, exactly. And I think that it should be noted that it's not a process of, when you're using an insulin pre-workout, it's not a process of how much can I tolerate, pushing the dose up as much as possible. I approach it more with I'm trying to make the process more efficient. I'm not trying to maximal, get as much insulin in me as I possibly can. And I think sometimes people, they tend to lose sight of that, or that's just their approach. They would think, oh, the more that I can tolerate, the better. As an example, I mean, there's a limit as far as how much fluid and how many carbs I can actually get in me anyway when I train, with or without insulin, because there becomes that feeling of I have too much in me. I have too much. I feel bogged down. I feel heavy. And it's funny that you said it, because I feel the same way. It's got to go somewhere. I mean, you can either feel too bad, or you're going to throw it up, or it's got to go somewhere.
Well, like I was asking you, Andrew, and I think that maybe our connection isn't awesome. But when I was asking about like pushing the doses up, how much water did you use when you were doing like the 150?
Okay. It was probably it wasn't as much as you guys were using. I heard you say something about a gallon jug, but it was probably closer to like 2 liters, I would say.
Yeah. I don't think I was using
50. Yeah.
Are you?
I can't go less than that. It just gets too heavy. At 2 liters, I can get 50 grams of carbs and EAAs and arguably some electrolytes in there, and not have it feel heavy. But again, I have to have that gap of that 2 hours. Sometimes it's 2.5, I guess, if I'm being honest. Yeah. If it starts to get over that, then I don't feel, I don't know, I feel empty in my stomach. Yeah. If it's too close, I feel full.
Yeah.
The other thing, like, well, I was going to say, like my process with using it involves you getting about 25% of it down the hatch before you even do your first working set. So, you get to the gym, you take your Schmichelin, and you start immediately sipping your Intra-workout while you're doing, if you're an old guy like us, you're doing 6 different warm-up rehab exercises. So there's 10 minutes right there. Talking to your buddies for the gym for 2 minutes, you're getting a few extra sips in while you're doing your first warm-ups. Before you on your first exercise, that's 3, 4, 5, 6 minutes. So by the time you get to your actual first working set, you should have 25% of the carbohydrate in your system. I think that's a pretty good way to do it, because you're not so sympathetically driven yet in terms of the actual work you're doing. You're warming up, right?
Yeah.
You're switching from parasympathetic to sympathetic. It gives you time to get a good chunk of it in without causing any of those digestive issues. So then you have less of a load to drink during your actual workout. I think that does help as well.
I'm a little different. I don't get 25% down, but I don't want to go against your rule, because I think it's a good rule. I think I'm kind of the exception. That's because I've tried that. I've tried to get up. I can't. I literally have to. There's a couple things. Number one, I don't want to run out. I almost always want to leave the gym with some there, just in case, and especially on a leg day or a session that is going to go longer and is going to go harder, depending on the the commute and just the amount of time involved. So it is individual. I guess that's more the point that I'm making, but I do agree with that kind of a rule, if you will. I think for the vast majority of people that would work well. Awkward silence.
What say you, Scott?
I probably about the same as you, Andrew. Try to get in that first 20-25% before I'm actually into training, before I actually am hitting that first working set. And then I try to finish it I'd say finish it at the beginning of, if not during, my last working set. And then plan to have food available, when I, like basically. And the nice thing is with highly branched cyclic dextrin, I'm starving afterward. But I also found one thing I've noticed about me personally when I was using insulin regularly, that if I were to start going hypo, highly branched cyclic dextrin never catches it for me. I needed dextrose with it, or I would still go hypo regardless. It didn't have to be a lot. I would
agree with that.
Yeah, it didn't have to be a lot.
So actually, that's one of the, to your point actually on that, because I noticed that as well. That's why I always tell people to keep a dextrose-based source of carbohydrate, like a soda, a Gatorade, some of the kids' candy, like in your gym bag or in your car, just in case. And I also tell people, like, if we're using insulin and Intra, I make sure that they keep their glucometer with them, because I want them to test themselves and experience and put a feeling to the number, if you get what I'm saying. Like, because being 72 and being, 54 are very different feelings and levels of feeling. And I do think it's important that people kind of start to develop that sixth sense if you're using intra-workout, insulin, and those types of things, so that they can plan accordingly if they need to. And I'll tell you what, like, it's rare in an off season that someone will go hypo. It's always in a prep situation. And I know a lot of people pull intra-workouts out during prep situations. I go the opposite way. I think it's time to put it in more than anything.
John did too, right?
If we're not, I mean, obviously that's where my influences come from. That, and but you'll find this, that as you get leaner and leaner and you get more insulin sensitive, you get done a workout, those 82s start to creep to 69s and 65s, and then the desire and the availability to eat needs to be met.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I can see that. All right. Anything else we want to mention on this topic? Anything you guys can think of that we haven't covered? And I'd say, as far as water goes, we talked about amounts, and I would say mix it thin. You don't want it to be, whatever you do, you don't want it to be like a real strong, concentrated flavor. I almost feel like just the flavor itself is kind of a trigger for digestion, and I want it to be almost like I use Crystal Light in my water sometimes, and I just want it to be like a twinge of flavor. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I let my EAAs flavor it, because my carbs are not flavored ever.
Okay.
For that reason.
We should maybe also talk about what other things do people put in their intra-workout. What are some other things besides the carbohydrate, besides the essential amino acids? Do you guys throw other stuff in there for your intros?
I'll say this.
Only my electrolytes.
It might go against, okay, maybe it doesn't go against Skip. I was going to say that I try to keep stuff away, because I think sometimes there's the thought of, so if we can push these, carbs into the muscle, then we should start pushing in a bunch of creatine and all sorts of other stuff. For me personally, since I don't want to trigger digestion, I'll try to get those things in pre-workout, like let's get the creatine in a half hour before I train, if you're going to use that. And if I'm doing like a pre-workout, maybe it would be, most of my citrulline would be there. Maybe I'd put a little bit of citrulline in it. But for me personally, I want to try to keep as little as possible, so that I can, like, what we're trying to do is hack digestion. You know what I mean? We're trying to hack the system so that we don't get that trigger. So that's been my mindset. Not saying that that's the only way to do it. So I'm open to, if you do something else, Andrew.
I think the only other thing I do throw in it would be like creatine monohydrate, typically. Obviously electrolytes, I use a product we make at Granite called Recovery, which John obviously designed, with Cyclic Dextrin, EAAs, essential amino acids. There's a little bit of sensoril, ashwagandha in there. But then I do throw creatine in there at that time, because, here's would be my argument against taking the creatine pre-workout, is that creatine's an amino acid, right? What do you need to get amino acids into the muscle? An insulin response. So I would argue that, and it's not, this could be a difference of 5 to 10%, right? But I would argue that taking them with the intra-workout increase in insulin release would push the creatine into the muscle more efficiently. And being a small molecular weight water soluble thing, I don't see it causing an issue with digestion. Like,
it probably
in the same way that in the same way that an intact protein would, or I just don't see it as. Now that, again, if people say, hey, since we added the creatine in, I'm starting to feel like different, I'm feeling like some rumbling. I'm like, okay, let's pull it out. We'll take it at a different time. No big deal, And I think the biggest take home message is to, start with something, and then gauge your progress from it. You know, start with say 20 grams of Cyclic Dextrin and 10 grams of VAAs and see how you feel on it, and then maybe bump it up to 30 grams of Cyclic Dextrin and 10 grams of VAAs, and then you can keep building on it until you find a point where, hey, this just isn't working anymore. You know, I'm starting to feel like I need to run to the restroom.
What's the highest you guys have ever taken your EAAs to?
Probably
I don't know
25 grams, I think.
That's funny. I was going to say 20. I don't know that it's necessarily high, but I'm like, you know, it's one of those things that you can't really quantify. You can't analyze. It's more of a digestion thing, and you're going by how you feel. And there's really nothing that's going to go, wow, this really works. Or,
damn, those EAAs are kicking in.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm not a creatine guy. I haven't taken creatine in 15 years, probably. It's just not something I tell my clients the same. I'm like, you take it if you want, but it's not a deal maker or a deal breaker as far as I'm concerned. And, you know, not bad, not good.
For what it's worth. For what it's worth, I threw it in because Granite sends it to me for free now that we release it as a commodity product.
Well, and I have this note. It's funny that you say about free. I have this note in new clients' plans that when I talk about the supplementation part, I say, and I'm paraphrasing, to make my point, I get all of my supplements, anything I want, in the quantities that I want for free. And these are the things that I recommend because I could just take a boatload of stuff and I just don't think it's worth it. Now, that's not to say that True Nutrition or any other nutrition company out there puts out bunk or garbage things. But as an example, I don't use pre-workouts because anything that has a stimulant in it is going to mess with my sleep because I train later at night, even though I'm up at night too when I get home to work. And I cannot use anything like a beta-alanine or anything like that that will hit my nerve pain. Yeah. And that's part of the reason that I have not used a pre-workout longer than I have not used creatine. I don't trust them. I don't know what's in them. And there's usually more in them and I don't need something to hit me. My excuse is always, if I don't feel like training, I'm not training.
Yeah.
It doesn't have anything to do with a pre-workout.
I started creatine again just because it is cheap. And there's the research now about brain health. And that's so for me, I'm like, yeah, you know what? If I get an extra pump out of it, that's great. But if I nowadays, I just take it because it is so like it's flavorless, right? And I keep it in a little glass jar next to my coffee maker, and I just put it in my coffee in the morning now. So it's like, yeah, I get it one way or another.
With your collagen.
Interesting.
Yes, exactly. Do you know that? I have my collagen tub, the 2 tubs right there. And actually, it would have just been like probably in a True Nutrition bag. But Victoria is classy, so we actually got like glass containers that sit on the counter that look.
Yes,
a lot
I was
more
not
adult.
allowed from a young age when we moved to Evergreen that I could no longer have. It was a rule stated by my wife. I could not have protein jugs on the counter anymore.
I like the way they're nice. It's like that's your prize, but you got especially when you have to pay for them. That's like I'm proud to have that out there. You know what I mean?
Do you guys?
Do you
guys remember?
She said no. She didn't want anybody walking in the house thinking I was a meathead or thinking anybody in there was. She goes, I don't want anything bodybuilding related up on the walls or anything. The only thing I had was a Marilyn Monroe picture in the bathroom. It was a black and white, and it's a classic. Over the toilet that in the main bathroom that was her doing those little tiny dumbbell presses.
You were allowed to have that.
I was allowed to have that because that was and I mean it wasn't like she fought me on it.
Right.
It was just that I agreed. I'm like, you know what? I really don't need jugs on the counter and that sort of thing. We're raising kids. I don't need people coming over going, what's going on here?
Well, that jug's for my syringes,
Do you guys remember I think it was in like the Project Super Heavyweight DVD when Justin Harris had all his like Cyclic Dextrin and protein like on the washing and drying machines?
I don't offhand, but yeah.
That's going back.
I feel like it was those videos, but it was like, like he would go and he'd make his intro and pre-workouts and he'd be scooping stuff on his wife would come in and change the load while he's doing it. And
I got to go back and watch those. We should do some sort of reaction video to that. We've been doing a bunch of reaction videos. So if you guys can think of anything we do a reaction video to, that'd be fun.
Only because it's a hot topic right now. That kid, Sam? Sam Sulek, right? Yeah. Everybody is talking about him left and right. And
they really are.
I've only seen like one I've only seen one video with him in it, but yeah.
How did this happen? Can somebody explain what happened?
How does anything
You know what it
happen?
reminds me of? It reminds me of the really hot chick, the really hot random chick at a football game who there's just a video and she's in the background and this perfect thing happens and it just goes viral and then she gets sponsorships and endorsement and everybody's paying attention and I can't figure out why.
Yeah, but that makes sense. No, that makes sense, Skip. That makes absolute sense.
Because this doesn't make sense, apparently. I can't figure it out.
This one
I
doesn't
know what
make
it
sense.
is.
I know what it is. I think I know what it is. I think it's that a lot of the younger people that we talk to on a daily basis are so programmed in that bodybuilding has to be this very specific thing and that you need to be optimal and everything needs to be perfect and your sets need to look like this and everything is perfectly controlled and calculated. And we oftentimes wear like a doctor's jacket while we're writing plans and it's all spreadsheet bodybuilding. I think it's a pushback to that, in my opinion, that holy crap.
Okay.
This guy can just eat a bunch of cereal and go train his ass off with whatever form he wants. And, obviously he's got good genetics. He's making progress. So there's that. But I think it's a pushback to like the over scientification, if that's a word I just made
So
up.
that's
Sorry,
his
Skip.
shtick, essentially. He just does whatever and trains heavy.
I don't think it's a
and takes
shtick.
gear and just,
I don't think it's a shtick.
Okay.
I think he's just a bro.
Well,
He's a
I
bro.
think it probably started out as a real deal thing, and I think it's become his shtick.
Now
because you know what I mean, of the popularity and the YouTube and all that stuff. And I know Fuad. I think Fuad pumps him up pretty big.
Yeah.
So
yeah. But I think that's where it started, and who knows?
Makes sense.
And a lot of people were against him. So that kind of created, like, a lot of the older guys were like, oh, he shouldn't be doing that and he should be doing this. And then there was a lot of pushback to the older guys saying all of that. So, you know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah. So now,
well, and that's going to make the younger demographic latch on to that even more. So at least this is making more sense. I couldn't figure it out. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know. The only thing I could get was he seems to like randomly like I'll eat when I want, I'll eat a lot and it's not great food, and then I'll just train and he's getting big and that's the appeal. I don't know. I mean, I don't know enough about the guy to like him or dislike him, other than I'm hearing like random people will ask me about his name. And it's kind of a unique name, so it stands. It's not like John Smith, and you're like, who is this guy? You immediately know. You know, it's Sam. Something starts with an S, Sulek or something like that. I don't know, but I don't know enough about him to know. So,
yeah. Well, that's my take. Again, wish him luck. And here's the thing. I think that's where we all start. Like eating the McDonald's diet and just shoving food in and lifting heavy weights. And if he sticks with it, that he'll continue to refine it and, probably pick up a lot of the things.
Is he real young, like a teenager?
I don't even know. I think he's like 20, 22, maybe is my guess.
Okay. Yeah, if I had to guess 22, 23.
I watched only one of his videos, and it was actually a reaction video that Mike Israetel did. And it's really funny because I think that Mike Israetel was kind of being really careful not to call him out, because he, like Sam got on a machine and he's doing these rows or something, and it was like just the worst fucking row you'd ever seen. And you're like, he's just like, he's just like whipping this weight around. And the way Mike is like, well, you want to make sure that you decompress the scapula and full range of, and he was like, well, okay. So I can see some redeeming qualities about what he's doing. That's the way he approached it, And he's like, he's got a good head on his shoulder. He's a good kid, and I see him going places. Like he didn't tear him apart like I would have probably expected him to, based off of the things that he believes in. You know what I mean? So that's the only video I saw of Sam, was just him being reviewed by somebody else.
I think we can chalk it up to the simple. I use time like when clients will send me somebody doing something and they look like let's say Branch Warren, right? Obviously trained really hard, but his form was probably more like the Sam Sulek train you're mentioning than than the stuff Mike Israetel would recommend, right?
Yeah.
And I just say, look, genetics are the #1 determining factor in success in bodybuilding, regardless of the types of food you eat, the types of drugs you take, the type of training you do. Genetics are the #1 component of success. And so you better pick your parents.
Yeah. All right.
He's young and he's getting away with it. Good for him, because I'm sure we all did it. I'm not going to trash the guy.
I think that's been the bark back at anybody who harasses him about not doing things correctly. People will say, "Oh, well, you're just jealous. You can't get away with that." You know what I mean? That's
true.
Kind of the attitude.
And they would be correct.
Yeah, exactly.
I would love to be able to eat McDonald's. Well, I don't even like McDonald's, but junk food of some sort, and train haphazardly and just kind of do things as I want to and maintain health and be able to grow unconditionally. That would be awesome.
Yeah. That'd be the best, man. All right, let's wrap this thing up, guys. We appreciate you being here. Another episode of Blood, Sweat, and Gear with Skip Hill, Andrew Berry. I'm Scott McNally. Check us out over at, you can go to bodyberry.com. Reach out to Andrew. Teamskip.com. You can reach out to Skip. mcnallydiets@gmail.com. And, of course, truenutrition.com. Use our code THINK. Supplementsource.ca for our Canadians. And thank you to everybody from Patreon. Comment over there with questions. Comment on this on YouTube so that you guys can, get more questions on the show and we can keep making this thing. It's a give and a take, guys. So comment below. We'll see you.